What does it mean to give everything, only to watch it slip through your fingers? I was 24, standing in the driveway of our modest suburban home, the keys to Dad's brand new silver sedan dangling in my hand. The car gleamed under the late afternoon sun, its curves catching the light like a promise of something better. Dad had bought a week ago, a reward for years of scraping by, and I was the first to drive it. Mom and Dad sat in the back seat, laughing like teenagers as I navigated the familiar streets of our town, the engine purring beneath my hands. For once, I felt like I was carrying them, not the other way around. I'd always been the responsible one. The eldest of three, I was the daughter who stayed close to home, who called every Sunday, who helped Mom with grocery runs and Dad with his endless yard projects. My younger brother, Ethan, was the opposite 19, reckless, always chasing some half-baked dream. He dropped out of college after one semester, spent his days skateboarding or gaming, and barely showed up for family dinners. Yet somehow, he was Dad's pride, the son who could do no wrong. I didn't mind. Not really. I loved Ethan, even if his carefree attitude grated on me sometimes. I figured we all had our roles. Mine was to hold things together. That day, driving Dad's new car felt like a reward. Mom's voice floated from the back seat, teasing Dad about his old clunker finally being retired. "Lila, you drive like you were born for this," Dad said, his voice warm with pride. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his graying hair catching the light, his smile wide. For a moment, I imagined the car could be mine someday. Not that I'd ever asked Dad work hard for this, and I wasn't the type to expect handouts. Still, the thought lingered, sweet and fleeting, like the scent of Mom's perfume in the air. We drove for hours, looping through town, past the diner where I'd worked summers, the park where Ethan used to skin his knees, the hardware store Dad loved. The car felt like an extension of me, smooth and responsive, a dream I hadn't dared to dream. When we finally pulled back into the driveway, Mom hugged me from behind, her arms warm and familiar. "You're our rock, Lila," she said. I smiled, brushing it off, but her words settled deep in my chest. The next morning, everything changed. It was a Saturday, the kind where the air feels crisp and the world seems to hum with possibility. I was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, when Dad called me outside. Ethan was there, slouched against the garage, his skateboard under one arm. Dad stood by the car, keys in hand, his face unreadable. "Lila," he said, "you know how much this car means to me." I nodded, my stomach twisting for reasons I couldn't name. "I've decided who's getting it," he continued, and my heart leapt, then froze as he turned to Ethan. "Son, it's yours." The world tilted. Ethan's eyes widened, his usual smirk replaced by shock. "For real?" he asked, dropping his skateboard. Dad tossed him the keys, and Ethan caught them, grinning like he'd won the lottery. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my coffee mug cold in my hands. Mom appeared at the door, her smile faltering when she saw my face. "Lila," she started, but I shook my head, forcing a smile that felt like glass. "Why?" I asked later, when Ethan was out test driving his new prize and Mom was in the garden. Dad sat at the kitchen table, his hands folded, looking older than I'd ever noticed. "Lila, you're strong," he said. "You've always been the one we could count on. Ethan, he needs something to ground him, to give him direction." His words were meant to comfort, but they cut. I was the one who showed up, who drove them around, who cared for that car like it was my own. And yet, it was Ethan's now Ethan, who'd barely glanced at it until it was his. I wanted to scream, to demand why my reliability was a punishment, but I didn't. I nodded, swallowed the ache, and went to my room. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment in that car, every laugh, every glance in the rearview mirror. Had I misread it all? Had I been driving toward a future that was never mine? The twist came a week later when Mrs. Carter, our neighbor, knocked on our door. She was a quiet woman, widowed, with a sharp wit and a habit of watching the world from her porch. "Lila," she said, her eyes soft but piercing, "I saw you driving that car. You looked like you belonged in it." I shrugged, unsure why she was bringing it up. Then she handed me an envelope, her handwriting neat on the front. "Open it later," she said, and before I could ask more, she was gone. Inside was a letter, and with it a key, not to Dad's car, but to a not-for-used but well-kept blue coupe she'd owned for years. The letter was short, but every word hit like a revelation. "Lila, I've watched you carry your family for years. You deserve something of your own. This car isn't new, but it's yours. Drive it somewhere new, somewhere just for you." I stood in my room, key in hand, tears blurring my vision. Mrs. Carter, who'd always been on the edges of my life, had seen me in a way my own family hadn't. The days that followed were a blur. Ethan, predictably, dented Dad's car within a month, his carelessness proving Dad's hopes misplaced. I didn't gloat, I couldn't. Instead, I drove my coupe, feeling the weight of Mrs. Carter's gift with every mile. It wasn't shiny or new, but it was mine, earned not by expectation, but by someone who saw my worth. I started taking weekend trips, short at first, then longer to the coast, to quiet towns I'd never visited. Each drive was a step towards something I hadn't realized I'd lost, myself. One evening, I pulled into the driveway after a trip to the mountains. Dad was waiting, his face softer than before. "Lila," he said, "I made a mistake." He admitted he'd hoped the car would change Ethan, but it hadn't. He apologized, his voice thick with regret, and for the first time, I saw the weight he carried to the fear of failing his kids. I forgave him, not because it erased the hurt, but because I understood now, love, even when flawed, is still love. I kept driving my coupe, its engine a steady hum beneath my hands. Ethan grew up, slowly, finding his own path. Dad and Mom leaned on me less, as if my absence on those weekend drives reminded them I had my own life to live. Mrs. Carter's gift wasn't just a carrot, was a lesson. Sometimes the things we want most aren't meant for us, but what we find instead can take us further than we ever imagined. In the end, I didn't need Dad's car to feel seen. I had my own road, my own key, and a horizon that was finally mine to chase. And maybe that's what family is, not a perfect gift, but a messy, beautiful journey we navigate together, even when the wheels don't turn the way we expect.